Let's get started. Don't want to waste any more of your time. We're grateful that you are both here today. So thank you everyone for joining. We are having another one of our SOSV Climate Tech Summit breakout sessions, and I'm grateful to have Climate Base, who's an org I've been in touch with for a while, as you guys just do incredible work helping people. Well, I guess it's twofold, and you'll get into it, but just helping people from both sides help the climate equation of talent. And I love what you all do. So I'd like to introduce Ann Downing, who is a senior recruiter at Climate Base and works in the both sets of jobs that I was describing, but she'll do a better job than I ever could. And then Evan Hines, who is the co-founder and CEO of Climate Base. And, I think we're all kind of having a similar mission. How do we get the best people to work on the biggest problems? And so with that, I will leave it to you all. And I'm going to hop off the screen. I'm here if you need me. For everyone in the audience, I think you've seen enough of these, but chat box, if you want to know what you're up to, what you're doing, what you're working on, where you are calling in from, you scroll over to the Q&A, drop your questions for Evan and Ann there. And then they'll get to those, upvote the ones you really like, we'll sort by popular. And with that, I'm going to hop off the screen and leave it to both of you.
Awesome. And Steph, we have until top of the hour, right?
Yeah. I mean, but we'll give you a few minutes, of course, because, that's our fault.
No worries.
All right. Well, folks, it's such a pleasure to be here. I'm joined by my colleague, Ann, and we're going to be talking about hiring and climate. So today we're going to be talking about really looking at the data that we've collected here at Climate Base, combining that with some industry level data, and really talking about what are the big pain points when it comes to recruiting and climate and what can we do about it. But before we dive in, I want to briefly introduce myself. I'm Evan. I'm, as Stefan said, CEO and co-founder here at Climate Base. We're the leading platform for climate careers. And before I dive into anything else on Climate Base, I'll pass it to Ann, who works with us here on our team. Ann, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Ann Downing, and I am a recruiter who's been recruiting for a long time. I've been in the climate space for over 8 years now. And I'm working with Climate Base not only as an internal recruiter, but we've also just launched recruiting as a service for our clients, which I'll talk about more toward the end of the presentation. So it's really great to meet all of you and be here with you. Pass it back to Evan.
All right. So as I was saying, before we dive into all the cool data and insights and all the stuff that we got prepared today, I want to quickly set the stage. What is Climate Base and why do we feel like we have something to say on this topic? Well, we are the platform for climate careers, and we're on the mission to mobilize talent to accelerate climate solutions. We do that by helping climate organizations, companies, nonprofits, climate tech companies, clean energy companies, and everything in between hire top mission-driven talent. We have a hiring platform that is quite robust. We also have a community with our fellowship. We also do content and education, both publicly and also within our fellowship program. But today we're really here to talk about the jobs. And so just again, setting the stage, we have now every month around 250,000 monthly users that use Climate Base to discover and apply to thousands of jobs across hundreds of organizations. And over the past few years, we've been able to help around 10,000 people get hired through our site. So we feel like we're really moving the needle on this. And again, setting the stage, especially because I know that, of the 80 or so folks here with us today, that many of you might actually be job seekers. So while this presentation is in many ways designed for recruiters in this space, I figured it would be interesting just to share, again, setting the stage, what are the most common types of jobs that are posted in this space? Of all the organizations that are hiring, what sort of roles are in highest demand? And I think for many people, including recruiters, in fact, it may come as a surprise that software engineering, sales and business development, operations, marketing, communications, and electrical engineering, and so many other roles that you would expect to see at actually many different kinds of organizations are in the top listings of like the most common roles. I think a lot of people sometimes think that, working in climate means you need to be a climate scientist or need to be a sustainability expert. And in reality, the roles that are in highest demand are actually the same kind of roles that you would expect to see at a lot of different kinds of companies. Now, moving through, when you're given that these roles, for the record, are well, what I'll say is, again, at Climate-Based, we're really focused on helping organizations hire mission-driven talent. So as we think about the very vast range of roles that exist within this space, and that previous slide, I was only just highlighting the top 5, but it's actually it's like an enormous pie chart rainbow of all different kinds of roles. But across the board, you're going to want to hire mission-driven talent. And I know that for many, that seems intuitive, but it's really, really important. In fact, it might be more important than you think it is. So let's take a moment to talk about that. First off, companies with a high level of purpose, with an organization that is really leaning into its mission, tend to outperform the market by 5 to 7% each year, which puts it actually in the top percentile of companies, broadly speaking, across the entire economy. So there's actually an advantage at the highest level when you look at the aggregate of organizations that hire mission driven. Now, another really interesting thing that we found is Harvard Business Review reports that 53% of executives believes that purpose drives innovation. So this isn't just looking at the numbers. In fact, more anecdotally speaking, the leaders of organizations recognize this to be true as well. On top of that, and this one might seem kind of a no-brainer, but again, really highlighting why it's so important to hire mission-driven talent. So better collaboration among team members is a huge, huge benefit. If you're all working on the same mission and you all really feel that mission, you have that shared alignment there, it can really foster that sense of community, breaking down silos and promoting collaboration. And additionally, when it comes to keeping your employees engaged, making sure that they're like really fully plugged into their roles when they're on the job, it's important to note that Deloitte found that 73% of employees who say that they work at a purpose-driven company are 50% more likely to be engaged, or rather, are 50% more engaged. So really leaning into not only your mission, but really hiring talent that aligns with that mission is just fundamentally better. I'll fly through these next ones real quick, but they're also equally, if not more important. It's not just about hiring the right person. It's about making sure that that person's going to stay with you for some time. There's a huge cost to having to replace someone if they leave your team. So this is probably one of the most important factors to pay attention to here. And again, this is from Deloitte, from some of the same study that we are looking at down here. Employees who derive meaning from the work are 3 times more likely to stay for multiple years, and critically, 50% less likely to leave within the first year. So it's actually not only higher kind of outcomes, but also lower risk to hire mission-driven when it comes to retention. Additionally, mission-driven talent are generally more likely, or less likely, I should say, to try to negotiate for an above-market rate salary. Now, I'm not saying you should pay people who are mission-driven less, but rather it's just that if you're thinking about hiring someone who may not be mission driven, you can expect them to probably try to negotiate a higher and perhaps even above market rate salary because they care more about their money than the mission of the organization. And then this one's also kind of a no-brainer, but I'm going to say it anyway because it is really, truly important. Recognizing how valuable mission-driven talent is to your mission-driven climate organization, the more mission-driven folks you hire, especially in the early days, the more mission-driven talent your team is going to attract. Folks that recognize, your team members really feeling your mission and engaged with your company, not only within it, but on LinkedIn and talking about the work they do. All of that is going to attract more folks that you really want to hire. So given that climate organizations are obviously mission-driven, we're focused on climate, and given, jumping back to this other slide real quick, given that the role types that you're hiring for are the same kind of skill and talent that you would expect to see broadly across the entire tech market for talent, you would assume naturally that climate companies would have an easier time hiring. But in fact, that is not true. This graphic here is actually taken from a Bloomberg article that was recently published that looked entirely at our data from Climate-Based. We've actually we've actually tracked hiring times across all the different types of role types that we have on our platform, which is about 50 to 60 different role types. And we're always adding more. And we tracked it from the source of truth. So this is not reflective of climate base. This is actually directly from these companies' career pages, tracking when a job went live and when that job was taken down. And what we found is that broadly, climate companies are actually taking 18% longer to fill roles. On the aggregate, this is costing the climate ecosystem likely hundreds of millions of dollars every year. Hiring is extremely expensive. It's extremely time consuming. And so closing this gap is what we're all about at Climate Base. And we were particularly interested to find this out when we crunched the numbers. Now, as a fun fact, what are the hardest to fill types of jobs? Well, turns out data science and analytics are, as a category, are incredibly difficult for climate organizations to fill. 117 days on average to fill these role types. Followed by software engineering at 106 days, human resources and talent, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. And again, these are just the top 5 hardest to fill role types. So if we want to think about what are the talent gaps, or where are, in other words, where are climate organizations really struggling to hire talent, these top 5 areas are obvious bottlenecks. So why is this the case, right? I mean, it seems kind of odd that all these mission-driven organizations would have such a hard time hiring mission-driven talent, especially given that the kinds of roles they're hiring for are the same kinds of roles that you'd expect to see at many different kinds of companies. And we know that so many people are looking for mission-aligned work. So why is that? What are the fundamental reasons there? And what can you do about it? So Anne and I have been thinking a lot about this. It's not just data-driven, but it's also like looking at our own platform and recognizing some trends that we're able to see within employers on our platform. But Anne, with her many, many years of experience, in fact, over 8 years of experience hiring in climate tech specifically, we wanted to talk about this with all of you and put together a bit of, not only talk about the problems, but also highlight the solutions. So first off, I'll lead with this one. It's fundamentally hard to attract mission-driven talent. And yes, generic job platforms like LinkedIn and Indeed and others, you can get a ton of applications there, but you have no way of knowing whether or not they're mission driven. And on top of that, Anne, do you want to share this stat here, because you're the one that actually shared this with me?
Yes. So when you post a position, pretty much on any Indeed, the major job boards and your own ATS systems, your own career pages, typically about 95% of the applicants are not a fit. So it takes a really long time internally to review all the resumes. So the better you are upfront at attracting the mission-driven talent and the types of candidates you need to fit your roles, the better off you're going to be in your recruiting process.
Yeah.
Because looking at 100 resumes and only getting 5 that you want to reach out to is super, super time consuming.
Yeah, like I think sometimes, especially early stage startups, incorrectly assume that their goal should be to get as many applicants as possible. And I can say, like, we recently went through some hiring on our own team at Climate Base. A few of the roles that we posted had over 1,000 applications. And like, if you've never done recruiting before, say you're a really early stage founder, you're like, oh my God, that's amazing. We have so many people to select from. Yeah, but how are you going to get through all of that and whittle it down? I mean, that is, you actually don't want that many applicants. What you really want to do is cut through the noise and find the folks that are most likely to be a strong fit. And if we with the recognition of how valuable mission-driven candidates are, reaching mission-driven professionals where they are is an obvious way of kind of pre-vetting some of that right up front. So like, obviously subtle plug for Climate Base. That's what we're all about. And so that's like problem and solution number 1. I'll pass it to Anne for this next one.
Thank you. So the next problem is employers don't pitch themselves well. So it's really, really important to pitch yourself well from day one, whether you're pre-seed, seed, Series A, because recruiting is a big job. It's expensive. You want to make sure you get the right talent to help your team grow. So make your climate mission clear on your job descriptions, on your career page, on your messaging, if you're posting on Climate Base, on LinkedIn. Just make sure you have a really concise, clear mission so you'll attract the types of candidates that you want to work at your company. And then avoid the technical jargon. There's a lot of technical terms that are getting thrown out there, and sometimes that's great for attracting customers, but that's a whole different marketing pitch than it is pitching to potential employees. And then make sure you have clear job descriptions. A lot of founders and CEOs are brilliant people, but don't have any experience writing job descriptions. So it's always good to get help, have someone review them, because you want to make sure that they're not too lengthy. Candidates will go through a job description in 30 seconds. And if it's too long, sometimes just move on to the next one. So you want to make sure you have on there the requirements, but most importantly, what type of person you're looking for and who would really thrive and bode well working at your company. And then these things all go for your career page and for your job descriptions, but list the benefits. That's one great thing. Climate companies tend to have really, really cool extra benefits, some that the large companies don't. So candidates that are looking in the climate space know that their salary is not going to be the same as working at Google or Facebook or the big tech companies. But what they do get in return are bring your dog to the office. If you have an office where people can bring their dogs, some people love that. Go, great. I want to work in the office, and now I don't have to worry about where my dog is going to be. And then any other, gym memberships, unlimited paid time off, 3 or 6 months of parental leave. If people see those types of benefits, they're going to get excited, and it will give you a better chance of them applying to your job. And then emphasis on company culture and the team, and be really transparent about it. I mean, there's obviously at a lot of startups, it's not a 40-hour work week. You're going to be working 60, 70, 80 hours. But because you're doing that, we're going to buy you lunch and we're going to buy you dinner. So anything that you have, just give them the real story about what it's like working at your company and why it's awesome and the rewards they're going to get in addition to monetary salary.
Yep, absolutely. Next big challenge here, and forgive me, I had to refresh this because I realized that I wrote "why are the challenges," which is not a grammatically correct sentence. So the next big challenge that we believe to be the case is that employers incorrectly assume sometimes that they need candidates that have climate experience. And while it is certainly beneficial to have the right person with the right mission alignment and the right skill set and the right experience, having climate specific experience may like really focusing in on that actually may leave you to miss out on some of the best folks that you really should be considering. So our advice here is to really consider talent that doesn't have climate specific experience, because a lot of that can be learned on the job. It really depends on the role, right? Like if you're hiring for a sustainability or a climate focused role, you're going to obviously need them to have that kind of experience. But if you're hiring for, say, a software engineer or a data scientist, they really might not need that climate experience. And so just keep an open mind to folks and really let them tell you why they're so interested in working in climate. Again, uncover the mission alignment, and then perhaps you can be the employer that gives them that climate experience that they're so eager to gain. The last one I'll pass to Anne.
Okay, so time is money. We all know that time is money, and your climate company probably doesn't have a lot of either, because at startups, people are on overload. So recruiting is super important, as I said before, to think about from day one. Usually your initial team is people in your network, people that you had gone to school with, employee referrals. But when you get to a certain point, you kind of have tapped out your network. So have someone fully dedicated to the entire recruiting process. If companies are under 15 employees, under 20, they usually are not at the point where they hire an internal recruiter. But if you have an HR manager, if you have a chief of staff, it's a lot of work for them to do it, but have at least one person be the point person, rather than saying, okay, we've got 2 hardware managers, 2 software managers, everyone look at all the resumes and then funnel the resumes to whoever you think is the right hiring manager. That can get really, really messy. And then some great candidates can get overlooked. So if you don't have someone that has the ability and the time, consider getting outside help, whether that's a contract recruiter, bringing in a recruiter, using a service such as climate-based recruiting as a service, which you can contact me to get more information on. But it really streamlines the process. And in the long run, it's going to cost you a lot less. Interviews are very expensive. So if you have 5 people on your team interviewing a candidate, CEO, a VP, you can do the math on your salary and your time. And it's super, super expensive. So when you bring a candidate in for an on-site interview or virtual on-site interview, you really want to be 80 to 85% sure you're going to extend that person an offer unless something goes really, really wacky. So just bringing in everyone that looks to be okay is super time consuming. Hence, you're spending a lot of money. So having it organized and a really streamlined process from the beginning will really set you up for success in hiring great, great candidates. Yeah,
absolutely. And anecdotally, I'll just share that, when we went through a hiring sprint over the past couple of months, we had some roles that we had Anne's support on, running the whole process for us, and some that we didn't, and because we were like, we can take these on ourselves. Boy, were we wrong. It really, really makes a huge, huge difference to have someone who's not only fully dedicated to running this whole process, but extremely experienced in doing that. And so I'll just say personally, working with Anne has been a huge benefit to our own hiring. So very, very meta message here, I know. All right, so I think that does it. I know we've been blabbering on for a while now, and it looks like the vast majority of you have stuck around. So I'm really excited to move into Q&A. Before we do that, I just want to say, if you have any additional questions, looking for advice, if we can't get to your questions right now, or if you're interested in connecting with us at Climate Base to learn about how we might be able to help you, here is Anne's email. Don't hesitate to reach out to Anne. She's wonderful and can answer all your questions.
And I also just put it in chat if anyone wants to copy and paste it.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's do Q&A. I think we have a few minutes right now, so I'm excited.
Yeah. Do you want to just go every other one? And maybe, Evan, I think the first one about well, actually, they just changed. So how about I'll start with the first one and then you take the second one. And if we need to flip them around, we can.
Sure. I'm actually having a hard time seeing where the Q&A is. So
it's to the right of people, chat people, then Q&A.
Chat people and then Q&A.
On the right-hand side of your screen.
Oh, I see. There we are. All right, cool.
Okay. So the first one is, how have you seen the market for climate tech jobs evolve over time? Is there more interest, availability lately? 100% there is, because there are so many new climate companies. There's so much funding going to climate companies that they're actually able to grow and hire employees. So personally, being in the space for over 8 years, there are a plethora of opportunities now compared to what there were. And there's a lot more interest from candidates that either have climate or don't have climate, which does make it potentially, quote unquote, easier to fill positions, even though it's still hard. But there's also been a spread across the country where 5 years ago, it was mostly the Bay Area, San Francisco, and maybe a few other cities, where now there's climate tech companies all over the world, but really all over the country. So it's really, really exciting to see companies popping up all over the country, as well as a lot of remote friendly companies as well.
Yeah. And also, again, I feel like it might be pointing out the obvious, but we've seen hundreds of billions of dollars pouring in and committed to climate over the past couple of years, from, things like the IRA, but also the private markets. When these companies are raising capital or unlocking large grants, the vast majority of the time they're using this for hiring. And so unsurprisingly, as we've seen all this money go into climate tech, we're seeing a huge amount of jobs being created in this space. In fact, it's estimated that over the next 10 years, I saw a Deloitte report on this that said they are expecting, 300 million new jobs. That can't be right.
No, but it was a crazy number.
Yeah, it's a lot. So as the world looks to basically scale climate solutions, it's radically changing basically our entire economy, replacing industries with different kinds of organizations that are working within that industry. And so a whole new wave of jobs are coming online. And yes, there is more interest and availability. Let's do the next question. Why climate education / awareness is so expensive? What is the major contributing factor? Well, gosh, that's a great question. I would say that traditional education in general is how do I say this in the most politically correct way? I don't think that you need to spend $80,000 on a year-long master's program at Columbia in order to build a career in climate. So, I mean, subtle plug, not so subtle plug, but we at Climate Base actually launched our own fellowship program to make practical, real-world climate education far more accessible to people. Because the current model around higher education takes way too much time. A 4-year degree is, I'm not discouraging anyone from going to college, but the reality is that, like, in order to work in climate, especially if you're already a working professional, you definitely don't need a full master's program. You don't need to go back to grad school in order to make that transition. And we know because over the past year and a half, we've welcomed over 1,000 fellows to our fellowship program, and we've seen incredible outcomes with folks getting jobs that had, prior to this, their fellowship experience, zero background in climate. But we've been able to see tons of success stories there. All right, let's do the next question.
You can take the slide, answer the slide question, then I'll go to the chemical engineer question.
Okay, well, I provide the slides. Unfortunately, we are not going to be providing these slides this time around, but we are planning on actually doing the same kind of presentation. We'll probably soup it up a little bit, add a little bit more to it. And actually inviting all of the employers on our platform to join for a session on best practices. So, Michael, if you're interested, subscribe to our newsletter. If you're an employer, definitely make sure you create an account on our platform so that you get the invite for that session.
Okay, and then what pathway do you suggest for a chemical engineer to be eligible for the climate jobs? Are there any particular courses, or they can apply directly? Absolutely apply directly. There are a ton of companies in the climate space looking for chemical engineers. It's super applicable. It's a very easy transition to go from a traditional chemical engineer. If you're in food and drugs, might be a little bit different, but as long as you have a good reason, compelling reason as why you are interested in that specific company, and let the employer know during your interview that anything that you're missing experience with, you are willing to ramp up, you're willing to take courses. They'll most likely even pay for the courses. Chemical engineers are in high demand right now. Jump on the Climate Base website, check out jobs. You can keyword search, and you'll definitely find positions that are looking for chemical engineers.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny, we, Ann and I actually so we kicked off cohort 4 of our fellowship with 400 new fellows that we brought on, that we selected from over 3,000 applicants. We just started that this week. And yesterday, me and Ann were giving a whole session, a way more detailed session than what we were able to do with the time given today. But it was all about basically finding jobs, applying to jobs, how to position yourself as you look to transition into climate. So maybe in the future, SOSV will invite us to talk about that, because we do also have a lot to say on the job seeking perspective.
Definitely.
Do you want to take the next question?
I'll take this one. Yeah. What makes a candidate stand out? Great question. Great question. A candidate stands out if they have a compelling reason of why they want to work in climate. If you join networking groups, I'm always a big proponent, Evan knows this, of networking. I, as a recruiter working with climate companies, will always look at candidates that don't have climate experience, because you learn a lot more from a candidate in a conversation rather than reading their resume. An example I like to give, if someone's an electrical engineer and they have no climate experience, but they tell me they want to work in climate, I ask them why. If they start talking about, I'm really passionate about the space, I have solar panels, I installed them myself on my roof, I have a smart panel at home, that just tells me that they've been following climate for a while and they really have a compelling reason to move into the climate space. I will absolutely bring them in for an interview, because I know that's the type of employee that will give their 120% and be so thankful that they were able to get a job in climate, that they will be an awesome, awesome employee.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I see another question that I think is really interesting, and I feel like you would be way better. The question that's any suggestions for recruiting professionals in the space who are looking to move into climate tech internally, at a VC, or at an agency?
Okay, great. I didn't see that. There's so many questions there. But if you have recruiting experience, you can recruit for climate. You don't have to have that climate experience. Everybody needs to start somewhere. So once again, let the company know why you're interested. in climate, specifically why you're interested in that company, your passion. That is a perfect example. Recruiting, accountant, finance, those are very easy transitions because they're not technical. So there's absolutely no reason a company should not hire you because you don't have the climate experience. You can network, you can find the candidates. So if you're a recruiting professional and you want to make the move to climate, that should be a no-brainer, and there shouldn't be any obstacles, preventing you from doing so.
Yeah, and I see a bunch of questions here. It looks like the vast majority of our attendees are probably job seekers. Maybe we should have included a little bit more in these slides about that. But look, I'll just say broadly speaking, a few tips for the job seekers here. First off, all the advice that and kind of what we're encouraging employers to think about in terms of meeting the mission-driven folks where they are, because mission-driven talent is so much more valuable. It's all the more reason then for you as a job seeker to really do the same. And of course, Climate Base is one of many great options out there. I personally think we're the best, and the numbers show it. But making sure that you're on your LinkedIn too, and really talking about your interest in climate, framing yourself as a really mission-driven candidate that cares a lot about this space is going to speak volumes to why you might be someone that a employer should take an extra hard look at when they're considering hundreds or even thousands of applicants for a role. We also would encourage you to consider checking out our fellowship program if you're interested. We do receive far more applicants than we can accept per cohort, but all the same, check it out. It could be valuable to you. And then just additionally, make sure you just keep going. I mean, I think sometimes people think that, we went through a crazy kind of bubble in tech over the past decade. And I think a lot of people kind of got it in their heads that every company is growing, every company is hiring like crazy, and getting a job shouldn't take longer than maybe like 2 or 3 months. The reality is that we're living in a different economy today. And it is, for many of you, potentially going to take a bit longer than that. It could take shorter too. It really depends on your strategy and the way you approach things. But persevere through it, because I can tell you, having now helped thousands of people make that transition into climate, we all the time we get messages back from folks who found their job through climate. We see them tweeting and tagging us on LinkedIn and on Twitter, and life-changing experience going from a big tech company where maybe you really don't care about the mission at all, and it's just the brand and the salary that's kept you there, and then actually transitioning into work that actually gives you a sense of purpose in your life. Aligning your income with the work that needs to be done in order to avert a climate catastrophe, and being able to say that this is what you do for your job and this is how you make money is something that I think is truly life-changing for a lot of people. Going to bed every night knowing that the work you did today was actually moving the needle on something, on probably the most important issue ever that humanity has ever faced. So that's my final closing thoughts for all of you. And it looks like I'm getting the cane to get pulled off stage. Stefan is back.
But thanks for letting us stay on longer, Stefan.
Yeah, really appreciate that.
You all deserved it. Also, I just thought there's no way any other thing you answer could be more poetic of an ending than what you just said. That was just straight from the heart. And that was beautiful. It was like, that's a great time to finish up. It's a great wrapping up line. I want to thank you both, first off, for your patience and resilience in getting the sessions set up. We're grateful to have you both. I will also just give a second shout out to the fellowship program, as a lot of people in my current network, as I do a lot of this ecosystem building stuff, have recently graduated from the program or are looking to join the program. I think hopefully accept into the new programs. I have some friends who are, in your bubble. And it all just seems like they come out much more, incredible, more hireable. We get some CVs occasionally and we see that and we're like, oh, this person has been there, did this thing to get them closer to where we'd like.
Yeah.
So,
well, thank you. I appreciate that for sure. And yeah, again, we're by no means desperate for applications. We accept usually about 10% of all applicants that we receive. But if you're on this call right now and you're intrigued by what it might be able to provide you, still I would encourage you to apply. Our next cohort will be beginning in early 2024.
Fantastic. Evan, Anne, thank you so much. Everyone who joined us, thank you tons. You see how to get in touch. I pinned it into the chat to get in touch with Anne if you have any thoughts, comments, concerns, questions. And the website, climatebase.org. Check it out. Great resource.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care, everyone.